All right, well, I'll go ahead and get us started. Thank you all for joining. This is the wealth breakout of the 8th Annual Inclusion Summit. I am more than honored to have 3 wonderful women here today to speak on wealth building strategies we're primarily going to focus on African American people, but certainly the strategies we're going to talk about today are not limited to African Americans. They help all people that are historically and traditionally marginalized, and where we see significant gaps in wealth. I want to just react to a few things that we've heard so far today. I think we've had some of the most amazing speakers. I want to recognize that wealth, while today we're going to be talking about a lot of income generating strategies, we're also going to be talking about wealth in the sense that people are building assets like homes, saving towards a home and purchasing a home, or investing, or getting interest-bearing accounts. So we want to talk about wealth as it relates to both income and assets. I also want to note that today we're going to be talking, since our audience is business, we're going to be talking about what businesses can do, that those businesses that employ people, and some of the creative things they can do to ensure that people are sufficiently compensated and are able to build assets. And so we'll talk further about what the Thriving Workforce Quality Jobs Framework is, but I also want to note that business development or business, self-employed business, is another viable and legitimate strategy for people to earn income. But we won't be talking specifically about business development today. But I do want to recognize that if we are to raise up and invest equitably in especially African Americans and African American women in particular, business development is a really important strategy. So I don't want us to forget about that. But today we're going to focus on what employers can do to ensure that they're providing quality jobs and that people are ready to fill those positions when they're created or revised. So first, I want to have us do introductions. I've neglected to introduce myself. I'm Michelle Rich, and I'm the Community Impact Officer of Income at United Way of Central Iowa. I've been in that position for about a year now. Can't believe it's been a year. But I get the opportunity to work with these amazing women. I want each of them to introduce themselves, and we'll go in alphabetical order. So first off, Terry, would you mind introducing yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. Terry Caldwell Johnson, CEO in the Oak Ridge neighborhood, and also chair of the Directors Council. It's great to be with you.
And Terry today will talk about some of the strategies that she's using to support her staff, her employees at Oak Ridge neighborhood, and also share some level setting data from the One Economy report action plan. So thank you, Terry, for being here today. Vicki, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. I'm Vicki Cummings. I'm a business advisor for Central Iowa Works. I retired January last year, Convention and Visitors Bureau, and was doing some work at that time with Thrive and United Way and Central Iowa Works in developing the hotel industry and better jobs for people through that medium.
Thank you, Vicki. And Vicki is doing, like her introduction stated, she's doing some levels of intensive work with business to improve the quality of their positions that they offer, and to just take a different perspective on the jobs that they provide. And so important work happening through Central Iowa Works. And thank you, Vicki, for being here.
Glad to be.
Sunita, please, last but certainly not least.
Thanks. So I'm Sunita Mangrodutcher. I'm the Operations Director for Central Iowa Works, which is the workforce intermediary arm of United Way of Central Iowa. And I lead our retail and PCV work that we do.
Thank you, Sunita. And Sunita is humble. She's one of our experts on the Quality Jobs Framework. And so she will be sharing what those components are and adding some flavor to what local businesses are doing in those areas. I first want to start my first, the first part of this presentation, of this panel, is not a question. It really is level setting for all of us, creating a shared context of why we are focusing on wealth generation. As it states in the description, there's a significant disparity between African-American wealth or median income in Polk County and the general median income of Polk County. It's a difference of about $33,000 a year, which is extremely significant and certainly an area where we'd like to focus our work. So we can see that there's some parity there. But I want to hand it over to Terry first to talk about the context around this. And so she's going to share some data from the One Economy report. Terry, go ahead.
Thanks, Michelle. And I'm going to share my screen so that we can very quickly walk through this data. I've been working for the better part of the last maybe 7 years on work called One Economy. And One Economy is a 6-year effort that was funded by the Northwest Area Foundation. It's primarily focused on the racial wealth divide and included in sort of the community of practice. The cities that are actually doing this work are Des Moines, Seattle, Tacoma, Portland, Minneapolis, and St. Paul. So while we have all taken a different path to begin to define what the racial wealth divide looks like in our communities, we are all focused on the racial wealth divide, but through varying vantage points and different initiatives that really are sort of place-based local strategies that allow individual communities to develop a framework to respond. Our work really is centered around both qualitative and quantitative research, and Michelle was actually involved in the first phase of our research when she was at the State Public Policy Group. But they are our research partner in this work and have really helped us to not only center ourselves around how best to use the data, but really to utilize the data in a way that begins to frame a series of action steps and next steps for our community. So let's just put who Black Polk County is into context. African Americans and individuals of African descent comprise about 4% of Iowa's total population, about 7.1% of the Polk County population. And right here in Des Moines, we have the highest proportion of any city or town in the state of Iowa, with about 11% of our total population individuals of African descent. But I think it's important for us to also recognize how diverse our entire community, our county is becoming. About 4.6% of our West Des Moines population is of African descent, about 2.8% in Johnston, 1.6% in Ankeny, and about 1.2% in Waukee. So I really share that information because I think it's really important for us to recognize how diverse our community is becoming, not only here in the central part or the core part of our county, but also in the suburban parts of our area as well. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about a few of the key data points included in the One Economy report. The report includes 5 focus areas: financial inclusion, employment, education, health, and housing. And today I'm just going to give you a real quick snippet of employment and education. But the thing that's really important about this data is as soon as the data emerged, it became clear that right here in Des Moines and Polk County, we have our own tale of two cities. So what does that really mean? In 2016, when our initial report was launched, Des Moines was the 11th best place to live in the United States, but we were also the third worst city in the United States for African Americans. We were the second best place to find a job, but at that same time, nearly 16.7% of African Americans were unemployed, and that was over double the rest of our county's population. We were the #1 best location for millennial home buyers, but for the period 2010 to 2014, only 1.4% of all home mortgages were made to individuals of African descent. And then finally, we were the #5 best city for retirement. But for that same year, less than 11% of Black households in Polk County had any retirement income. So it's really important to sort of focus on those last two data points, the 1.4% of all home mortgages and the 11% of retirement income. When we talk about wealth development, asset creation, and that transfer of wealth, the two greatest opportunities for that to happen is through property and through retirement income, IRAs, CDAs, whatever we may have. And as you can see, for African Americans, that likely is not happening at a very high rate. So let's fast forward to 2020. We updated our data. Let's see if we've made any progress. We were the third best affordable place to live in the United States, but at the same time, nearly 54% of our Black population was a cost burden renter, which meant that they were paying more than 30% of their annual household income to cover the cost of rent. And as Michelle has already indicated, the median household income between the majority community and individuals of African descent is about a $30,000 difference. So when you're paying 30% of $30,000 for your cost of rent, your ability to do much else is very, very limited. We were the 7th best city for living the American dream. And as you can see, the Black unemployment rate has come down from the 2017 levels, but we're still nearly double that of the rest of the Polk County population. And the important thing about this particular data point is that it is a pre-COVID number. And we know the disproportionate impact that COVID had on communities of color, especially Brown and Black individuals. So you can well imagine that that unemployment rate is likely higher than 11.7%. And then finally, we were the 4th best place for children. And while the graduation rate for the majority population is fairly close to that for the Black population, when you begin to peel back the layer of the onion and you go a few steps further in disaggregating the data, the most important data point here is that the graduation rate for males of color, in particular African-American males, is closer to about 65 or 70%. So I'm going to very quickly go through the next couple of slides. Unemployment or employment is a really important indicator of the opportunity for financial security. As you can see, the unemployment rate for African Americans is continuously higher in Polk County than that of the rest of our community, nearly triple. The individuals in the labor force, while that number is high, we still have a relatively low unemployment rate or high unemployment rate for individuals of color. And the thing that's really important about this slide is that in our high poverty areas, those 10 neighborhoods that we call the urban core, we have a negative 15% job availability. People can't even live and work in their own community, but we have a plus 9% job availability in the suburbs. But we also know how difficult it is to find affordable housing in our suburbs. And so this particular data point is really one that we want to look at very closely when we talk about job availability versus where people live. And then the other thing that's really important is this thing about education. We know how important education is to employability. The percentage of Black residents in Polk County with post-secondary degrees is about 24.1% as compared to the rest of our county, which is about 45%. And as you can see, individuals with graduate or professional degree attainment is lagging, On the left side of this slide is all of Polk County. On the right side of this slide is Black Polk County. So again, for nearly every data point, we are significantly lower when it comes to graduate and professional degree attainment. So again, as Michelle indicated, the median household income, while it has increased for both populations from 2017 to 2020, the gap continues to be about $30,000. And there's a lot that any of us could do with an extra $30,000 in our pocket. So Michelle, I'll conclude and I'll turn it back over to you with that last data point.
Thank you so much, Terry. And I think what this highlights and what we're going to talk about today is that employment is really important to not just surviving, but thriving, being able to build assets. But what's almost more important is that that job be of quality. And we're going to talk more about what that means. But we're also going to talk about two different components to that. It's not just that we have jobs available, but also that we're supporting people to fill those positions. So when Terry talks about the mismatch of training and education needed to fill these jobs, we're also looking at how do we offer those supports so people can be ready to meet the demands of the workforce. So I want to hand it off to Sunita, and to kick us off, what does a quality job mean? What does the Thriving Workforce Initiative define as a quality job?
We looked at a lot of different national research and local research on quality jobs and really took the best of all of those and put them together. The PCB project has 6 pillars. We kind of narrowed those down a little bit. And really, when people think about jobs, they look at the first thing everybody always comes is pay, compensation. How much are people getting paid? And that's not the only thing. When you ask workers what's important to them, that's not always what comes back. And so we look at 5 different aspects for a quality job. Those are pay being one of them, but scheduling is important. So do they have a stable schedule? So do they know they're going to work these hours every week so that they can set up daycare or other jobs or whatever else they need to do so they have a stable schedule? But stable schedule is also not always what people are looking for. Sometimes they're looking for a flexible schedule because they have another job or they have other things in their lives that change. And so they need to be able to work different hours. So sometimes a flexible schedule is what people are looking for. And then how far out a schedule is put out so that they know in advance what their schedule is going to be. So scheduling is important to people. Benefits are also important to people. It's not only are we talking about healthcare benefits, but other benefits as well. What other kinds of benefits can you offer your employees? Some employers offer a transportation benefit so that people can use public transportation possibly at a lowered cost or at a free rate. One of our employers offers like an emergency assistance transportation benefit, so that's something that they can offer. I often use myself as an example. At United Way, we have a fitness center that we offer as a benefit, something that I'll never use. So the fitness center isn't a benefit to me. So are we offering benefits that meet what our employees are looking for? So benefits are important to people. Recruitment and training. So recruitment, retention, and training are important to a workforce, and being able to have people a stable job and stable people in your jobs if you're an employer is important. The ability to move up within your either in your employer's location or organization or within the industry. So it's important for training, the different types of training that is offered for skill building and for personal growth. And then engagement. So employee engagement, are we making sure that we're asking our employees what they want and what matters to them and what their goals in life are? So those are what's really important to the thriving workforce job qualities goals.
Thanks. And I think when Terry talks about especially a home as a way, a bridge to building wealth, a lot of Americans' wealth does lie in their home. What role do employers have in housing? I mean, what can they do in order to encourage asset building specifically?
A variety of things that employers can do. Financial literacy classes or training, understanding what the basic financial literacy, understanding what all of the things that come out of your paycheck are, and why that's important to them. And then saving dollars, saving for retirement, saving for building assets, things like that. Those are also in the wealth building part of what can be an opportunity for employers to offer their employees. Some employers are able to offer loan assistance programs in order to benefit their employees in the long term.
Yeah, and those benefits that are offered, if affordable, that's almost like putting dollars in the pocket of employees. If health insurance, for instance, is affordable, that's an important benefit. Thank you. Vicki, now to your work with specific businesses. What are you seeing small businesses doing around the quality job framework, just generally, first off? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I think what's interesting is I'm working with small businesses of all different types, and some of the consistencies that I'm finding is really the engagement piece. And I think that, you know, part of where we're at right now with COVID and everything else that's going on is that employers really want to engage more with their employees and have a better understanding. Compensation is a part of that. You know, they really want to know, are they in line where they should be? What other opportunities are out there for compensation outside of maybe just a pay increase, or how to do it and how to do a pay increase? And, you know, instead of doing it just once a year, looking at doing it more often now. And they really want to know what base pays are across the metro area and how they can be competitive with that. The other thing that I found really interesting is that for the recruiting and the training piece too, employers seem to be very receptive of giving time to employees for training, and the training that's available through Central Iowa Works, you know, with the Dale Carnegie is a very much interest to them because they know that that training's really, really good. And it helps build confidence, because confidence is something that I've been hearing from employers, that they have staff that they feel have leadership capabilities and abilities to advance themselves, but their own confidence just is not there. So they're having that. I think the thing that is interesting is when we start working with these companies, they go through a survey, and you know what you're supposed to know, and you know what you are supposed to do. And so when Sunita talks about scheduling, they feel like they should have their schedule out 2 weeks in advance, and they feel like they do, but when they take the employee survey, that's not what it's coming back at. So, you know, I really think for employers, they need to step back, look at the basics, and are you doing what you should be doing? Part of that wealth building and growing is the empathy and knowing your employees too, right? And another consistency that I found is that an employee needs to have conversation with their supervisor once a week, once a month at least. And that's another thing that the owners or the head management feels happening, but when you do the surveys, you see that that's not happening. So again, in order to understand which each individual employee might deem as important to them or wealth building for them, you need to have a better understanding. You need to have those communications, both so you understand them and they understand where the emphasis is and the opportunities are from that current employer.
A lot of what you're talking about falls in line with what we've been hearing this morning about treating people as individuals and valuing what each individual brings to the company or the organization. And so when you talk about empathy and knowing each individual employee as being really important and something that businesses want to work on, and they recognize the value in that, I think is really important to note. And also the desire to develop leaders within their organization. And it might be as simple as just building that confidence. But I think both of those things speak to the roles that the individual employee has and also the employer has, that individuals need to take those opportunities, but employers need to offer them. So I think it's a two-way street there.
I think too, and you know, one of the things that we've talked about, and especially with a lot of these are entry-level positions, but these entry-level positions, you know, that I'm dealing with right now have a start out pay of anywhere between $9 and $18 an hour and potential for growth. Not only potential for growth, but most everybody I'm working with has opportunity for management, probably within 24 months, 36 months, to be making, you know, a very good wage. And so it's just reminding them that these are stepping stones and that dialogue is happening. So whether those stepping stones can be at that particular company or they're stepping stones to in that industry to another company or that skill set. And so the stepping stone, I think employees need to realize that is an opportunity. That's one of the ranks on the ladder, you know? And so they're having those stepping stones and knowing that they're making progress, that needs to be a constant dialogue back and forth.
Terry, as an employer, how do you get employees to take advantage of these opportunities?
Well, you know, one of the things that we value greatly is the investment that we make in our employees as we skill them up, get them ready for their jobs, invest in training and development. And we want to protect that asset. We want to retain that employee. So we really work hard to identify ways that we as the employer can support the needs of our employees in both traditional and non-traditional ways. So we've, you know, we've always had a 401k, but over the course of the last several years, we have significantly increased the employer match. We've also done a really good job of holding down the employee match on healthcare premiums. So we are absorbing a larger percent of the employer share so that we can drive down those costs for our employees, recognizing that while salaries are great, benefits are an equally important part of an equation in terms of not only employee recruitment and retention. So those are sort of the more traditional ways that we're supporting employees, also through training and development. But a few years ago, we recognized that we had a lot of our employees, especially those that were on the lower end of the scale, and we've really, we don't pay anyone less than $15 an hour in our organization. But we also know that for a lot of people, they're still struggling. And, you know, there are any number of things that can stand in the way of someone's ability to make it to work any day of the week. And it became clear to us that we were, you know, having situations where employees had small emergencies that, were we to create an emergency fund, access to a small dollar lending pool, we might be able to mitigate some of those just basic challenges that interfere either with them being able to show up or show up on time. And so we started a small dollar lending program called Working Solutions. And it's based off of a United Way model out in Vermont. And it's really just that. We worked with a local credit union. We established a relationship with them. They are our lender of choice. And for any individual that applies to us, initially they're eligible for a $500 loan, has to be paid back within 6 months. And following the successful payback, they could be eligible for up to a $1,500 loan. But the thing that was really great about that was that we were able to help people that needed to make sure that, you know, the tires in their car were good so they could get to work, needed to do emergency car repairs, needed to do other emergency services that under any other set of circumstances likely could have affected their ability to be effective on the job because they're worrying about, you know, getting from paycheck to paycheck. And this was a way to sort of mitigate some of those challenges. We ran the program for 3 years and now we scaled it. And it's a community-based model that we are running through the Directors Council, primarily working with African-American churches in our community. But the thing that's great about it is that people have access to immediate cash. And the thing that's even better about it is that once that loan is paid off, that money goes into a savings account. And they're required to save for 6 months. And at the end of that 6 months, they can decide to pull all that money out or do something different. But it's creating that habit of savings. It's creating that habit of asset building and wealth creation that for so many people is outside of the realm of possibility. So we're sort of creating that pathway to not only successful retention of employees, but also ways that we support them in ways that, again, create a much stronger connection with our employees, but also a great way to sustain them in their respective roles.
Yeah, and do you find that I think quite a few employers will say, well, I just don't want to get in that business. But you note that it's a way for you to engage your employees and build trust and provide a tangible benefit. But I'm wondering if you see yourself as doing something for the greater community. And it sounds like you are because you've scaled it to the community. So talk about how it's an equity strategy.
Yeah, it's an equity strategy because what the One Economy data tells us is that African Americans are denied for loans at a rate of 2.2 times the rate of anybody else in the community. So typically what people are doing is because they cannot get access to capital through a bank, they're going to payday lenders. They're utilizing that predatory wheel of lending that is just a slippery slope that no one wants to get involved with. But when you don't have access to capital, when you don't have access to even $500 to make it from, you know, one paycheck to the next, then you're in dire straits. And, you know, you'll do anything. You'll go to a friend, a neighbor, a family member, or you'll go right down there on the corner of 15th and Vine or whatever and go to that payday lender. So this is a way to really mitigate that. And it's also a way to really work with our families. One of the things that is also required or work with our employees, one of the things that's also required is that they participate in budgeting and financial coaching, which for a lot of people they've not had access to. And Sunita talked about that a little bit earlier, ways that we really sort of use our employee-employer relationship to create ways that we support our employees, again, sort of in those non-traditional ways that sometimes can really make a difference in terms of our ability to not only retain them, but to make them that quality, solid employee that we've invested in, that we want to make sure that we retain within our organizations.
Well, Terry, we had a really good question and concerns to that from Patricia, who asked, how do the employees make their payments? Through payroll deductions?
Right, so we set up an automatic payroll deduct. It comes out of every other paycheck. And then once that deduction is completed, when it comes to their loan, then that deduction then goes into the savings account.
Great idea. So you talked about the habit of saving. They've created this habit that they're putting away, really, that money to pay back the loan. So why not keep it up? And then they can go on to hopefully build assets like savings for a home, right, perhaps. Or a new car that doesn't need new tires all the time.
Right. And for a lot of these people, and I'm sure for many of the folks who are in this session, especially with your lower level employees, you know, either they have poor credit or they haven't had an opportunity to build credit. So this is also a way of creating that banking relationship, increasing your credit score, or even being able to establish the fact that you do have credit and you can begin to build on that. So there are so many sort of tangential benefits that come as a result of it, especially for lower level employees.
We've talked a lot about the asset building component. Thank you, Terry. Sunita, I want to pose this question to you. Why is the quality jobs framework an equity strategy? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
So when we look at our employers and the, let's take, for instance, our supervisor training. So training of leadership, so identifying people within your organization that would be good leaders. We look at look at your frontline managers and look at your leadership. And if you don't have diverse people in your leadership, then we look at it as a strategy that you could be identifying those people from your front line to move into leadership roles. One of the trainings that we did specifically identified people who don't see themselves reflected in the leadership, and how they could go through a training and build the confidence to become leaders because they don't see themselves as being leaders. So the job quality components that we work on really can be drilled down in each individual employer on how they can benefit either that employer who could be an employer of color, who a minority business owner who isn't, who is affected just by the same things that Terry was talking about, by lending and things like that, and how those strategies can help benefit them as an employer, as well as their employees that they're helping lift up in the community into higher paying jobs.
Absolutely. I just, when you see Terry's, the One Economy action plan, those outcomes that we're seeing, it really begs for some sort of strategies that get to more systemic changes, I think. So this is each individual business taking some small steps sometimes to more equitable practices, really. So thank you for that. I liked Caroline Wonga when she said that there aren't any participation trophies in this. It really is about outcomes. So I want to, before we go to the key takeaways, I want to ask Vicki first, what kind of impacts or outcomes are businesses seeing when they invest in some of these strategies? Or maybe they haven't gotten there yet, quite yet.
Right, we haven't gotten there on several of them, but they are seeing outcomes for, you know, ways of looking at things differently. The meetings, getting those back on track and making them happen are creating a better environment. The culture, you know, that's the other thing we haven't talked about on this particular one, but the culture of the company, or the culture of the business is something that they had to think about and work with, but it's all coming together. And, you know, what's nice about this program is that the businesses are working with their employees, and so they're doing it together. It's not like a consultant's come in and left them with this layout of what to do, and then everybody has to work to make it happen. They're still working on it together, and they're doing it in little bits at a time. So the engagement piece, I think, is really happening. The other thing that I hadn't mentioned that I was kind of surprised about is that everybody that I work with had been taking applications from people just as they came in. So they were not spending the time or the energy to really think about who is their best employee and how can they build that employee and invest in that beginning start time. And so everybody now is taking a look at that. I've had the opportunity last year, I was chair of the Inclusion Council for the partnership. And so I had the opportunity of working with a lot of different great organizations. And I've been able to pair some of those up so that they could have better understandings. And, you know, that's something that I'll say, this is kind of deviating from it, but there are so many different agencies out there that can provide employees to businesses. These business owners don't have time. They just don't have time for the applications or building those relationships. And so I've enjoyed that opportunity of saying, okay, I think you two are good fits, and they are now building those directly. And so that helps with this whole wealth side of opportunities people hadn't thought about before. And then the compensation too, you know, taking a look at all the different opportunities of compensation and what works best and how to build that. Everybody is right on board with that and they want to do it. So those are some of the highlights, I think.
You speak, Vicki, to the first step in a lot of people's, well, it should be, in a lot of people's equity journey, which is just awareness. Awareness of one's privilege, awareness of our country's history, and perhaps your family's history, understanding historical marginalization, but understanding the culture in which you're operating is another part of that piece. So I love hearing that employers are being intentional about the culture that they might have and maybe the culture where they want to get to, and how maybe that needs to change or be tweaked a little bit to recruit and retain the best employees, which we argue certainly should be a diverse employee group. Thank you.
You bet.
So lastly, before we go into Q&A, I'd like each of you to take a moment and think of, share your key takeaways. And by that, I mean, what people attending the session are thinking, so what can I do? I might not be a small business owner, or, you know, I might be a cog in the wheel at my organization because it's quite large. So what can a person do or an organization do to help provide quality jobs and to hopefully mitigate some of the disparities we see in median income and in wealth building? So Terry, do you want to take that first?
Sure.
Just a few.
Yeah, just a couple of things that I would mention. You know, given my role in education and being on the school board, I don't think that we can underestimate the importance of investing in education and investing early. Early childhood education all the way through, you know, K-12 and beyond is critical, and especially for communities of color. It's really important that we not only create pathways and opportunities for young people to be able to access high quality education, but also to allow them the opportunity for career exploration, for college preparation. I know Marvin DeGier is on this particular session, and he and I run summer youth employment programs, which give opportunities for young people who may have parents that either aren't working or are not on a career path, an opportunity to really have, you know, some strong references to what the possibilities are when it comes to employment and employment opportunities. So that link between education and employment can never be underestimated, and starting early is critically important. And then I think the only other thing that I would offer is, you know, especially in the nonprofit sector, you know, we're hiring everyone from, you know, entry-level childcare workers all the way up to chief operating officers and chief financial officers and everything in the middle. And I think it's important to recognize that there are people of color that should be considered for every single one of those positions. We should never do a recruitment. We should never go through a hiring process where we have not taken the time and the opportunity to look for individuals of color who have the capacity and the wherewithal to fill those positions, no matter where they are in your organization. I think sometimes we get stuck on bringing people of color in at the entry level, but we have people of color who are equally qualified to compete at every level in our organizations, and we need to make every effort to reach out and find those folks.
Thank you. And I think it was at a partnership event that I heard, and Terry, you probably know this, or Marvin will, that including at least one person of color in your recruiting pool or those that you interview increases your odds of hiring an individual of color exponentially. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was really interesting. So if you have a pool, you're doing 4 interviews and 2 or more are people of color, you have a really great chance of hiring a person of color. I think that's a very powerful takeaway. Thank you, Terry. Start early and recruit at all levels. Vicki, takeaways for you.
My takeaways were empathy. I think empathy is so important to understand what is important and where each individual is going with that. Along with that, though, are clear goals. You know, sometimes a goal is you have to be here on time. You have to be here every day. And sometimes the goal is once you learn this job, once you get to where you're at here, then this is the next opportunity for you. But to be clear on those goals and what each of these individuals, where they're wanting to go and how you're going to help them get there. And right along with that are the one-on-one meetings. That is just so important. And it seems to be one of the first things that go, you know, you get busy. And so the first week it doesn't happen, or the first month it doesn't happen, then it doesn't happen again and again. So those are my 3 things that I would encourage businesses to make sure that they're doing.
Great. And those clear goals, I think, can't be overstated, both small and large and relating to advancement, especially when you perhaps have a management culture that conflicts with your employee culture. Having clear goals when done right could eliminate some of that miscommunication or misunderstanding among the majority culture and those that you're hiring. So thank you. And Sunita, please, takeaways.
Sure. Well, so Terry stole some of mine. So making sure that we're offering opportunities in high schools and even before. So middle schools, career opportunities, career explorations, and in high school that the people in this group can be looking at what internship possibilities there are, school to work opportunities, giving kids the opportunity to look at what careers they might be interested in. And if they're, you know, give them the opportunity to work in it and see if that's really what they want to do. And letting them see that there are other opportunities besides 4-year. There's some people that aren't interested in going on to college. And so careers in the trades or other opportunities. I talk about Wells Fargo has jobs that you don't have to have a degree, and then you can move up within the organization and things like that. But then to also really to be the voice for the people in your organizations. You talk about a cog in a wheel. If you see something that's happening within your organization that in particular with people of color or other diverse, you know, backgrounds that maybe are being passed up for leadership opportunities or things like that, you know, be the voice for those people and speak up, see what opportunities are available for them. If there's different types of leadership trainings, you know, make sure that the people that don't speak up are getting heard, even though, you know, be their voice. And so I really think that a lot of people that are on this in this call could, or in this Zoom could be the voice for those that aren't, that don't speak up for themselves. And so helping them see themselves as leaders and moving up within their career is beneficial.
And I've heard that for white people specifically that tend to be in situations at employers where there aren't people of color around, be their voice among white people. not just when they're around. So behind their backs, support them. I like that. Thank you.